Today I'm here with a special guest, and I'd love to give him a few minutes to introduce himself by sharing a bit of his background and what he's up to these days. Welcome, Ralph.
Thank you so much, Ro. It's good to be here.
Thank you for
My name
being
is
here.
Ralph Rodriguez, and I am the newest attorney at HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and I'm actually a local of the Northeast. I am in Yonkers, New York, so just across the river. But so glad to be able to speak with you this morning.
Perfect, thank you. So I wanted to take a moment to share an important update. As many of you know, Scott Woodruff has served New Jersey as our attorney for many, many years, and he's been a valuable part of our team. On behalf of all of us, I want to sincerely thank Mr. Scott Woodruff for his dedication, his professionalism, and the work he's done on our behalf. And we're grateful for his contributions and wish him all the best moving forward as he continues his work with HSLDA. HSLD has done a little bit of musical chairs, so we're beginning a new chapter with Ralph, and we welcome you, Ralph, as our new New Jersey attorney, and we're excited to have you join us, and we look forward to working together with you for years ahead.
Absolutely. I echo those same sentiments. Also want to thank Scott for his tireless work in New Jersey. And might I mention, he's not exactly done with New Jersey. I mean, he's always going to lend a hand.
That's
I
right.
just happen to be the main point of contact now. But I also, gave him his flowers, if you will, for attending your convention a few weeks ago. And I said, hey, there's still been no movement on these bills that we're about to speak about. So I think your speech kind of put some fear into the legislators and, let them know what's up. So, you could thank Scott for the quiet legislative front for now.
I love that. Yes. All right. So let's jump in. So we have all these shell bills. So all the bills from 2025 just got filed over into 2026. So while we did a recap, I'd love for you to kind of walk us through all the bills that we have currently. And we're super thankful, especially as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of our country, that we are still experiencing homeschool freedom in New Jersey. We know that we can't just sit back and be nonchalant. So let's talk about these bills and what we need to do to preserve said freedoms. Which one would you like to start with?
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a precursor to that, I mean, if you follow the news, you know that Connecticut just passed a law. Connecticut and New Jersey are both of my states of responsibility, and they were the most free states up until now. Now, Connecticut has some difficult regulations that, we don't have to go into too much detail. But as you said, New Jersey is still free. We enjoy a broad set of freedoms in the state of New Jersey when it comes to homeschooling. And so these bills that are currently presented before the legislature, they could pose a serious problem to that. So we want to pay attention. We want to be vigilant. Definitely not in a fear-mongering way, but we want to do our part as responsible citizens to safeguard freedom. So I think the first one is S 3910, and that's an annual notice bill, also public reporting. So that would require parents to annually notify their local district of their intent to homeschool. And it would also require the districts to compile and publish the number of homeschool students. You hear this a lot from district officials. Well, we don't know how many homeschoolers are out there. We don't know where our children are. I will say the truancy problem across the country is an actual and serious problem ever since COVID. There's just been a massive exodus from the public school system. Some of them are homeschooling, some of them are elsewhere. And so there's a tendency on the part of legislatures to blame the truancy problem on homeschooling. And so that's where this comes from. Um, Obviously, it would be a significant change in New Jersey since there's no annual notice required. However, it's not the most problematic one. We also do have somewhat of an accompany bill. It's Assembly Bill 1886, and that's also a notice requirement. And similarly, it requires districts to maintain records of homeschool students. So you see that propping up in a lot of states, and New Jersey being one of them.
I appreciate the balanced review. Like, we understand that truancy is an issue, so we're not going to pretend that it isn't. But at the same token, we want to make sure that we understand that this is not a homeschool issue, right? Like, we're always going to be the scapegoat for a lot of these issues. But I
Mhm.
also see the criticism and the hypocrisy in terms of you don't even know where your public school children are, but now you want to create oversight for another group of people who have decided not to be under your jurisdiction. So I think that's really interesting.
Right. Yeah. As you said, homeschool families and homeschool students tend to be a scapegoat for a lot of the problems that other uh, manner of education they're dealing with. And so, we don't want to feed into that narrative, but we also want to be a part of the solution, and maybe educate folks that, and say, well, this is not a homeschooling issue. The truancy problem didn't start because of homeschooling, and it's not going to be solved by blaming homeschoolers. So I think that's a key point. Um, would you like to continue on to other bills?
Perfect. Let's get into S741 and A1341. What are those bills about?
Yeah, that's our favorite bill, right? I think that was the bill that got Enjoy started last June. You guys were in your infancy. And so that is the annual meeting requirement, also known as the health and wellness check. And so that is just such a draconian bill, such a draconian idea. And it basically will require homeschool students to meet with a public school official once a year for a quote unquote health and wellness check. Um, I don't think we have time in the day to talk about all the problems with that, but I'll just touch on a few. First of all, very vaguely worded. Are they meeting with a school nurse? Are they meeting with a doctor? Are they meeting with the superintendent or a guidance counselor or a teacher? What does public school official mean? But more than that, I think it does a very poor job at once again stigmatizing the homeschool community and presuming that they are in need of a health and wellness check. It does not presume that these homeschool students are well and okay and being taken care of by their parents, probably being seen by doctors on a regular basis, doing everything that a public school student will likely be doing as well. So it just does a very poor job at putting a bullseye on homeschool families and suggesting that there's even a necessity for this. Now, I mentioned Connecticut a few moments ago. That was it was from a broader discussion that public officials are concerned about just really tragic cases that in which children were either severely harmed, abused, or unfortunately killed in the course of whatever circumstances they were going through. Not all of these, and I would dare say not any of them were actually homeschool family cases. But they were not in public school. Once again, we talked about truancy. And so it was a knee-jerk reaction to blame homeschool families and blame homeschooling for these tragic cases of abuse. So we see the trend also nationwide in saying, well, some children are being abused. They're not in public school. They're not being seen by mandatory reporters all day. So, we got to regulate all homeschoolers so that even one child does not suffer those same consequences. Um, it's unfortunate. Obviously, our hearts break, especially at HSLDA. Every case of abuse is tragic and it's abhorrent, and something should be done to prevent that. But you don't paint a broad stroke for all homeschool families when it comes to policy and when it comes to legislation.
Yeah, absolutely. I have so much to say on this bill. I know that there was a report that went out from the CDC and many prestigious organizations that are reputable. And one thing I noticed is that it said all the risk factors for abuse, and surprise, surprise, homeschooling was not on the list. So for an elected official to take the stance of, oh, parents with their children, they're not safe at all, I think it's a really egregious bill. Now, of course, you have other people who are like, well, I don't see what the big deal is. So, for someone who would say it's vanilla, it's not a big deal, what would you say to them in terms of jurisprudence and like why this actually is an issue?
Well, I would say, first of all, walk them through the actual bill and walk them through the real world consequences of a bill like this. Once again, talk about the vagueness, talk about what's actually not defined in the bill, and then talk about just what you said. I mean, the homeschoolers are all right, as they like to say. And it's precisely because parents love and care for their children that homeschooling works and that homeschoolers thrive when they're placed in these settings. And so we absolutely need to flip the narrative that homeschool parents and homeschool families are the best of us. And It's because we love and care for our children that we've chosen to take on this sacrifice and take on the time and effort, energy, resources in order to homeschool our children so that they can have that much better of an education. And so, yeah, you cannot speak of homeschoolers in a way that is going to mischaracterize them as abusers or folks who are suspect. And I would also say that we need to take a look at children who are being abused, families who are, going through difficulties that are in private schools, are in public schools, right? So it's a human issue. It is a depravity issue, a sin issue,
Mhm.
and it's not a homeschooling issue. And so when you look at, you mentioned jurisprudence or just good policy, we always love to quote Pierce versus Society of Sisters. That was a Supreme Court case over 100 years,
Mhm.
100 years ago, that basically says parents have the right to direct parents have the fundamental right to direct the upbringing and education of their children. And so that's a fundamental right that should not be infringed upon by the state, and it should be taken seriously as such.
Absolutely. And it's such an outdated myth that we're playing on, the fact that homeschoolers are isolated and no one is seeing them. I remember saying to my boys last year, guys, we are going to slow down. We're not going to just do nothing, but we're going to slow down and just do a lot less. And we were so overscheduled. So the idea that, this child, you're not seeing them. Like my neighbors see my kids all the time. We're in, whether in a co-op or a community, or you just go to the library here and there, like it's playing on the narrative of, the kids never come outside and they're just, chained up somewhere. Like that is not happening, especially not in New Jersey. So I think it's
Right.
interesting how we can just like latch on to these outdated ideas and use that to create these bills that honestly, what does it solve? Absolutely nothing because it's a piece of paper that you fill out once a year. And my thing is, if you want to attack homeschoolers because the children are with them, 24/7s, what are we going to do on winter break and summer break? Do public school and private school children, do their parents now have to fill out this bill because, oh my gosh, the kids are with them and there's no mandatory reporter? Like, come on.
Or how about children who are with their parents up until compulsory school age,
Right.
right? Is the government going to take a look at those kids for the first few years of life? I mean,
Correct.
what kind of society do we want to live in?
Correct.
You know, talk about a police state. And
Yeah,
so, we should shudder when we even think about those possibilities.
that's
And
right.
it starts with ideas like this.
Yeah.
And I'll just put one more idea out there related to somebody who might think, well, this is not that bad. It's common
Mhm.
sense. It might save just one kid. We would coin that term legislative or regulatory creep.
Mhm.
Even with a simple notice requirement. Okay, you get notice this legislative season. Well, a petty tyrant is not going to be satisfied with just one measure of regulation. It might be another 4 or 5 years, but somewhere down the line, they're going to realize, well, that we can get more out of this. And so we shouldn't just say, well, that's not too big of a deal. It's only a little bit. We've seen in other policy areas that if you give the government a little bit of rope, they're just going to take so much more down the line. And so, we need to be careful. Ronald Reagan said it best a generation ago, or more than that. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
Mhm.
So, the homeschool wins that were fought back in the 80s and 90s when HSLDA was just getting started with Mike Farris and Mike Smith. We, as you mentioned, we can't rest on our laurels. We can't say, well, that's done with. Homeschooling is in the mainstream, it's free. There might come a day where that's not so, and it's on us to be able to protect that freedom that we currently have.
That's right. You can see this one gets me really riled up. Because the other quote that I will say now that you mentioned that is the nine most dangerous words are I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And we get it. Like no one is going to say, "Hey, I'm from the government. I'm taking all your rights away." It's going to be this small thing, like you said. In project management, we call it scope creep, and you start. It's just, oh, just do this, and then the project starts expanding. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So. I really appreciate you sharing that and also highlighting the Supreme Court case because if any of these bills get passed, as we're celebrating 250 years, we're going back 100 years. And that is egregious. So if anyone thinks it's vanilla, if anyone thinks it's, not a big deal, think about the country that you live in, the freedoms that you've experienced, and going back 100 years. That is awful.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, let's get into the last one. 83394.
Yeah, so that one has to do with it's more so registration once again and curriculum oversight. So this would require curriculum to be aligned with state standards. You would have student portfolios, you would have an annual evaluation by quote unquote qualified evaluators, and then district involvement regarding a state endorsed diploma. So that last point could seem like it has its most appeal to the homeschool community when it comes to future plans for their children. Say you homeschool all the way through high school,
Mhm.
and then you have your parent issued transcript and diploma. Yet some schools, and whether it be universities or licensing entities, they balk at that and say, well, this is not official or this is not endorsed by the state. So you kind of feel like you're in a little bit of a quagmire there. You did
Mhm.
all this hard work for 17, 18 years, and now you're being met with some opposition. So that actually appeals to people because they say, well, yeah, I can get a state endorsed diploma, but you see the carrot and stick. You see that you have to abide by state curriculum standards. I mean, what does that even mean? Are we going to have to teach our kids critical race theory? Are we going to have to teach them, certain sexual mores of the day that are just totally misaligned with biblical ideas and principles? I mean, it's absolutely frightening what you can see happening if you give up a little bit of freedom for some convenience. Um, and I should say that the carrot shouldn't be that attractive. Homeschoolers across the country are thriving uh, with their future plans in secondary education and in career paths. So there are ways, and this is not the topic of conversation today. Perhaps we can do that another time. But there are plenty of ways that your child can have a successful career, successful post secondary education beyond high school. And so you don't have to, listen to folks that say, well, you need the state endorsed diploma or you need the government to co-sign on the hard work that you've done for all these years. It's just not worth it,
Mhm.
especially when you're looking at curriculum standards or portfolio reviews.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I would just say, once again, stay vigilant. It might seem quiet right now, but bear in mind that New Jersey has a 2-year cycle in its legislature. So this is the first year. Most of these bills were filed just at rapid speed in January. I think we have one in the month of March, but
Mhm.
it's been radio silence since, and you can maybe say, okay, well, nothing's happening. But just know that they're not necessarily asleep at the wheel. It's budget season right now in New Jersey, so that's being taken care of. But watch out for HSLDA alerts, watch out for Enjoy alerts, and make sure that you are steadfast in looking at those calls to action, so that we can make a difference when the time comes.
Absolutely. I think that's a fabulous point because I remember talking to Scott maybe around December, let's say 17th or 18th, and I'm like, we're 1 week away from Christmas. I think we're in the clear. And then
Mhm.
we saw the New Year's Eve bill. Like, come
Right.
on, what a snake.
Right, right. So we don't want to see a July 3rd bill um,
Oh gosh.
right
Let's
before
not give
people
them
are
any
going on
ideas.
vacation. Yeah, yeah. Sorry I put that out there, but regardless of what happens, they're before the committees right now, and we need to be ready to take action whenever that time comes.
Thank you so much. We're glad you're a part of the team. And again, we thank you and Scott for all the work you do at HSLDA.
Absolutely. Thank you.
My pleasure.